I'm Kari Rowe. You're listening to the Foreign Saints podcast, and I am happy and blessed to be able to say I am joined by my friend Dump Harper, who has been doing a lot of work with mental health and youth in the trenches in Ukraine. This is the series where we're talking about Christians in the trenches to combat the narrative that Christianity doesn't do anything good in the world, that the church is just full of hypocrites and snakes and all that sort of thing. And I just want to, I want this episode to be about my buddy and about what he's been going through. I've had my own issues with church hurt in the past. If you've been at all listening to my podcast and my series in Matthew, you definitely know that. We've been talking about church hypocrisy for a hot minute now. This guy is the polar opposite of all that, and so we're going to be having a pretty open and frank conversation just about like what ministry and one of the tougher situations I can imagine has been like for him, what God's been doing in him, through him in this. And so hopefully this would be a really good conversation. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the people, my friend. Let them know you're legit.
All right, Kari. So my name's Dump Harper. I was a pastor in ministry for 30 years. About a year and a half ago, I started an organization called Ceding. And we exist to support the mental health needs of teenagers in Ukraine during this difficult time and beyond. So I was raised in Charlotte. I've been in the same area pretty much my whole life, and grew up in a Southern Baptist church, so I got to see all the good stuff. So I have plenty of baggage. I've seen good stuff too, and I'm pretty much an open book. I'll answer anything you got for me.
Hey, sounds good. Well, like I told you, it's just kind of I guess you might say a pseudo tradition on the show. I like to just kind of start with just laying the framework of the gospel whenever I've got brothers or sisters on, and then going from there. I've just kind of found in my experience that it tends to, I can't like give a reason for why. I just know that it tends to create some of the more robust conversations that I've had. So, in your own words, in short, what's the gospel that you would present? What would you say?
Man, it's an interesting question these days for me. Just the journey I've been on, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest with you. Like I said, growing up in a Southern Baptist church, uh, seeing a movie when I was probably, I don't know, 5 years old, called A Thief in the Night, all about getting uh, left behind, all that stuff, and
Yeah, my wife tells me
scared
about those.
scared the heck out of me. I couldn't sleep at night as a little kid because I was scared I was going to be left behind. My parents would be taken up in the rapture, and all of this kind of stuff. Growing up, learning about saying a prayer to receive Christ, and anybody that doesn't do that is going to hell. So you have this urgency to make sure that everyone knows Christ as fast as you can, and and all that kind of stuff, and going through all different types of training techniques of how you get out and tell people about Christ, and to get them to that point where they say this prayer, and then you just move on, and go on to the next person and try to get as many as possible. And
Rack 'em
so
up, rack 'em up.
I had no understanding of discipleship. I had no understanding of anything like that, and so through my life, I've just been all over the place with trying to discover, what's it really all about. When you see something like, okay, you say this prayer, ask Jesus into your heart, then you're good forever, and I can let you go. I can move on to the next person. Looking through the Gospels, Jesus never said that. And so it's like, okay, how did we get there? So 20 years ago, I started looking like, how did we come to this place, like where you just say this prayer? And basically the earliest I could see was like Billy Graham, maybe even Billy Sunday.
Mm.
That could be like the earliest time that you see that type of conversion experience, I guess we could say. And So I believe that salvation comes through Christ. Um, as far as and when it comes to the gospel, I believe that what Jesus teaches is the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
They call them the gospels for a reason, and to me, the the central part of being a Christian, of being a follower of Christ, is to study Christ's teachings and try to live that life, as difficult as it is. And I think through my experiences through life, like I said, I've gone just it's been crazy. But I think in the evangelical church, which is what I was always a part of, everything focused more on Paul's writings more so than the words of Christ. And maybe it's because the teachings of Jesus doesn't fit well within modern American evangelicalism. Maybe not, you know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
for some reason, there was always more of a focus on Old Testament teachings and the teachings of Paul over the teachings of Christ. And then when Christ was taught, it was more like what Jesus really means here is, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah.
he can't mean what he's saying because that's too extreme. So what he really means. So yeah, you can tell I'm a person that's just thought through this stuff forever and ever and ever. And right now, um I'm still in that process of trying to figure out. I'm 56 years old, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what all this stuff is, and what does it really mean, and can I really believe in it. That's that sort of deal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just um salvation comes through Christ. You know, um, I will say that.
Hey, I tell you what, man. I gotta, I gotta give the praise for not just for an answer like that, not just for the obvious bit of like salvation comes through Christ, but I like the emphasis on the teachings of Christ. Like it's not just, say this prayer, walk down this aisle, get a little wet, get the t-shirt over and over and over again until you fill up two closets, right? Like, nah, it's the Great Commission. It's baptize them in the name of the triune God, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you. And I think what happens with this like weird separation of like Jesus and Paul is like people don't read Paul through the lens of Jesus,
Hmm.
which is I think when you do that, you actually start to see like just how much Paul only ever said what Jesus taught. But when people create like I mean, hey, you said it, like they create this bifurcation between Jesus and Paul. They end up creating like weird trenches in the New Testament where like there aren't any.
Right.
And so like I know at least for me as I've been going verse by verse through Matthew for like feels like over 2 years now, for the show, it's been really incredible to me how often I've seen the words of Jesus paralleled in the mouth of Paul, but how
Hmm.
often I see, like you said, modern day evangelicalism miss the parallel that's there. Like they think Paul's saying something new, and it's like,
Yes.
no, he's not. Y'all just don't read Jesus enough to see how much Paul is just, repeating what the rabbi taught. So,
Right.
it's wild,
You
like
know, and I think another thing, like we're told to make disciples, like what you just said. Um, that's gotten changed into make converts,
mhm,
and in reality, you can make thousands and thousands and thousands of converts in your life. Um, how many disciples can you make in your life? I would say the way I just see discipleship is somebody that you stay with together for their whole life, and you have all kind of discussions. You talk about Christ, you talk about life, you talk about the world, you grow together. Um, I would say real discipleship between the people that you can really invest in.
mhm.
I would say you might be able to make 5 disciples in your life.
Yeah, I think.
That's not as exciting as thousands and thousands of converts.
Well, nah, like you can, the number of disciples a person can make, I feel like is always going to be less than the amount of converts they could have made in the same time.
Yeah.
Because and I kind of feel that dichotomy, that tension too. Because I don't think I've actually mentioned this to you. The last few years, I've been going to to Charlotte Gay Pride and just doing a lot of evangelism there. Um,
Hmm.
I did it with a sign for my first time ever last year, and so much of that is like your approach in venues like that is so often dictated by what your goal is.
Hmm.
Like, I already know that in that scenario, I can't create a disciple because I can't create that long-term walk with you relationship there. So it's about planting seeds. And okay, well, how do I go about planting seeds? Well, I think at least in that scenario, clarity, clarifying what the gospel is, what the gospel isn't, showing a passion for justice, because so oftentimes people in that community haven't seen that out of the church,
Hmm.
and just emphasizing to the best of my ability positive interactions with people, hopefully just to get them thinking about the main thing, which is Jesus, sin, resurrection, the gospel, eternal life,
Yeah.
and just kind of anything that's outside the pale, anything that's going to distract from that for that weekend that festival's going on, like I'm not about it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've had some Black Hebrew Israelites and some Jehovah's Witness approach me wanting to discuss doctrine or whatever, and I'm like, not here. We're in a whole ocean of lost fish, and you want to have a discussion about Sabbath stuff. Like, what are we doing? Like,
Hmm.
you're
Hmm.
missing you're missing the point, Like, there's so many people here that haven't seen anything to do with the love of Jesus, and there's only like 5 of us out here that are legit, and you want to waste my time on this nonsense? Like,
Yeah.
you want to grab a coffee next week, then sure, but like I'm I've got a very specific purpose here, And sometimes I think we miss that intentionality in our day to day, just like walk through life with people. Like, you could have, and we're kind of going to get into this in this conversation too, but like you could have conversation about 50 million things, and you should have conversation about 50 million things. But sometimes you got to key in on the one thing that people need to talk, that person needs to talk about. Because, whenever a person asks you a question, you're not answering the question, you're answering a person. And, so often it's like for me to answer you properly or be able to speak into your life effectively, I gotta, study you a bit more in a friend kind of way, as much as, the venue allows for, and answer the person behind the question just as much as, if even more so than the question itself. So
Right. We were talking about Paul a minute ago. You know, how was Paul converted?
yeah,
I
like,
mean, I mean,
yeah.
who did Paul's conversion?
Oh
Who
yeah, that was
handled it?
that was Jesus.
Jesus. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So I think sometimes I think we make ourselves too important in the process. Like, to be honest with you,
Hmm.
and I think we get so like with this tunnel vision that it goes back to I've got to make as many converts as possible at this event. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what
Hmm.
I'm here for. When in reality, there may be one person in a big huge crowd that just needs you to sit and listen to them for 3 hours.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And I've had that happen in my own life, and it changed the way I viewed things like that, because I was on a mission trip in the Northeast, and it was one of these deals where we're supposed to be, like I said, reaching as many people as possible.
Hmm.
And I met up with this guy at this park, and it was a Sunday morning. And I asked him, do you know if you died today? Do you know if you would, where would you spend eternity? And he said, I'd be in heaven. And I said, why? And he said, because I've placed my faith in Christ. Well, I was trained that when somebody says that, man, God bless you, it's time to move on to the next person, right? Instead, I thought, this guy's here on a Sunday morning. I wonder what's up, you know?
Hmm.
And so I asked him, I said, what's your story? And he was a guy that had been in ministry, and had been hurt by the church. And literally, I stayed with him for probably 3 hours in that park, and he just poured his heart out. You
Yeah.
know, um, when I got back to the group that night, everybody went around the circle, and it was like, "How many people did you reach for Christ today?" And that was like the first time in my life that that felt so weird,
Yeah.
because I'm like, that would have been my focus always. But today, I know I was supposed to just sit and listen to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I mean, things happen in our lives that change the course of what we're doing and how we do it, and everything like that. So,
Yeah. I mean, we
didn't mean to take up so much time with that story, but
no, you're good because this is like I know it doesn't seem like it, but this is like a perfect foundation for this because like I've especially because I've been doing that thing at Charlotte Pride for like 4 or 5 years now, and like every year I go, I know there's gonna be one person, I don't know who yet, maybe two, but usually just one, where like I'm here today for that person, and I'll know it when the conversation happens, and yeah, sure enough, it's like every year there's always it's a 2 day festival, so one person per day. There's always like
Mhm.
one person where I'm like, this is the day. You know what I mean? Like the day, everyone else I talked to before you got the benefit of the gospel because God placed me here for you. You know what I mean? Like I was just
Mhm.
waiting until you showed up. And now we can talk for like the rest of the time, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
And this year was like very, very, very good as far as that goes, like
yeah,
you know, uh gender fluid, gender curious, uh Latina young lady, and we talked for like 45, 50 minutes just on like you know what's your experience, and she just had all the basic like Christian 101 questions for me, like what is Christianity. Like I see people with signs out here, but like you know for whatever reason I just kind of felt invited over just by like your demeanor, so like let's chat, and I'm like sure, let's chat, like she shared her past, I shared my past, and I was like, hey man, like this is the gospel. I hope this not just answers your questions, but I hope this answers what it sounds like might be the actual issue, which is you feeling like you can't come close. You can't. Like, you literally can. That's why Jesus died. That's why he's got me out here, and like, that was what she needed to hear, And it's not like, she broke down and like, said you know, said a prayer right then. But again, it's like that's not the goal. It's like the goal is just like to either plant a seed or water one that's there. And if praise God, I get to harvest, then I'm harvesting with the understanding that like I'm reaping the hard work of a bunch of Christians before me that the Lord had worked through up until that point, and He just graced me with the you get to harvest today. You're not special. You just
yeah.
get to today. Like that's all it is. So yeah, no, like you know, I like that. I like that. And I have a feeling that'll we'll circle back to that as we move through this. Um but yeah, as far as we move into, the Ukraine stuff and what you're doing out there, um, let the people know what's your organization, goals, methods, history, how did God move in you to move in this direction?
Yeah, so I first went to Ukraine in May of 2022. The current invasion began February 24th, 2022, and so I went with a humanitarian aid organization. I was a chaplain at a clinic, in a city called Chernivtsi, which is in the western part of Ukraine. And so a lot of internally displaced people had come from the east to the western part of Ukraine, and so it was a clinic set up for those folks. And so I was there 5 weeks, and the the stories that I heard from people in the east and everything that they had been through, the losses, and it was pretty overwhelming, just listening to the people, just knowing just hearing what they were going through was, um, it had a huge impact on me on the inside, even though I was trying not to show it on the outside. I wanted them to know I cared about them, but I couldn't like fall apart, obviously,
Right.
you know. But yeah, and so the translators that were there for us. Um, all of the and know that like my whole life I've always worked with teenagers and college age students and stuff like that. Literally my whole life. Um, all of the translators, the Ukrainians that were translating, were like from age 16 to, there was a couple that were like 25. They were the oldest, and so you had about 10 translators that were all basically teenagers,
Hmm.
and so um, it was really cool to be there and to be around them and to hear their side of what was going on, and to realize that when they came there to start working in the clinic, they didn't know they were getting paid. They were coming to help their country,
Hmm.
and when they did get paid, they would give their money to the military, to support their country. I mean, they blew my mind. I mean, honestly, and I got real close to them and heard their stories and what they were going through. Um, when I came back home after that time, the cool thing about today, the days we live in now, is like you can stay in touch with everybody.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so neat. Like when I first started, I think my first mission trip was overseas mission trip was 1988.
Hmm.
So like if you think about that, like, the only way you stay in touch with somebody is through letters. You
Yeah.
know, and like now, like literally, you can stay in touch with everybody you meet, and so I stayed in touch with the translators and started a Bible study, a weekly Bible study with them on Zoom. And so, it was great. We just were able to continue to build that relationship. Went back in December of 2022 as a chaplain again, but this time I was with a Ford surgical team. So it was surgeons that we were at the front line. So we were in the far eastern part of Ukraine. We were about 15 miles, 12 miles maybe from the harshest battles at that time was in an area called Bakhmut.
Oh wow.
Um, and so we were we were there. And so the, what we were in the basement of an abandoned school. It was a 4-story school and we were in the basement. And so we were working with the Ukrainian military doctors. And so the soldiers would be brought from the front line to that facility, and they would do surgeries to get them to a point where they could take them 2 or 3 hours to a hospital.
Yeah.
So basically it was a place to try to keep them alive long enough. So anyway, after I was there for 2 days, we got bombed. The building I was in got attacked by Russia with 2 Smerch rockets. It's a thing they call double tap. So
Hmm.
they'll hit it one time, and then once everybody has time to gather themselves and come outside to try to assess the damages, then they hit with another one and try to take out as many people as possible.
Sheesh.
Um, so so anyway, so that I could go into all kind of details with that, but it was it basically the main thing I took from that was the Ukrainian translators that were there then. We had 2 translators and 1 driver. Um, the look on their face compared to the look on our faces, and I'm
Hmm.
not talking about just the blood they had from flying debris and stuff. The look in their eyes. I didn't realize until probably 6 months ago that it took that long for me to realize that I was attacked because I was there and I was serving. They were attacked because they exist,
Yeah.
you know, and it,
Yeah.
it
That's
had a,
tough.
it's had a big impact on me. So anyway, I knew after that moment that the rest of my life would be spent serving Ukraine some way.
Hmm.
I didn't know how, but I knew I had to do it. Like it felt like my whole life prepared me for what I was doing there. And so I was doing a lot of research on Syrians, generational trauma, that sort of thing. And I realized that Ukraine was going through, the whole country's experiencing trauma, and it will go on for generations.
Hmm.
And so I reached out to some of those translators that I worked with the first time I was there, that I still had a relationship with through the Bible study, and told them I wanted to do something for their generation, and something maybe to help the mental health, support the mental health needs of teenagers. And they were like, "Yeah, let's do it." So 3 of them joined me, and I told them that I'm not going to be the American that says this is what you need to do. Basically, I told them, I said, "This is your generation, it's your country. Let's figure out the best way to do this, and I'll help raise funds in the U.S. and run the business side of things and make trips back and forth, and you run everything here in Ukraine." So So basically, that's how it came about. Three college students in Ukraine and me here in the U.S. They named the organization VDICH,
Mm-hmm.
um, which means to breathe out. It can mean to rest. And so they wanted to create a space where Ukrainian teenagers could rest and take a breath and express whatever they're going through without any fear of judgment. Yeah, so that's what it looks like in English. Um, and uh, and so yeah, so that's our website. But they love the name because it's an old Ukrainian word,
Yep.
and so yeah, it meant a lot to them, especially at this time because Russia wants to wipe out the culture. They want to wipe out the language. They want to wipe out the literature, everything that there is. So to hang on to anything Ukrainian is powerful. So even just using that word, meant a lot to them. So they wanted to create an app to where Ukrainian teens would have 24-hour, access to help, and to be able to build in the app breathing techniques, guided meditations, grounding techniques, things like that. That there's not enough therapists there, so it's things that a teen would be able to take on their own and use, like tools that they can use to help themselves as they're going through this difficult time. So we got busy planning that and ended up doing an event in August of 23 in Kharkiv region, um, which is one of the areas that's really been hit really really hard. There's still occupied areas in Kharkiv, in that oblast, and we decided to give them journals. And so we just talked to them about journaling, and we created a little journal that was just blank on the inside. It had our logo on the outside, and we just said, "Hey, this is a space for you to write, draw, whatever you can to just express what you're feeling." And we gave those out, and they started using them right away, and I was just like blown away. And so after that, we realized we need to create a journal that has um, questions that lead to like kind of like guided, not guided questions. What's the right word, Kari? Um,
Like prompts, maybe?
Prompts. There you go. That's it, man. So throughout the journal, um, we have prompts. I've got a copy here. I don't know if you can see it if I hold it up or not. If you want me to or not.
Oh, you can if
Um,
you like. Yeah.
so it's just a little. This is one that we just printed recently. We handed out. We handed out 50 of them while we were there, just recently when I was just there last month.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, it goes through and it just has these prompts to get them thinking and writing and expressing themselves. So we handed out 50 of those for students to use and to give us feedback. And I'll be going back in a few weeks, and we'll be handing out about 600 in the Kharkiv region again. And we're going right now to areas that have been occupied, and so in those areas, I mean, the people have experienced the worst of the worst stuff you can imagine. Like the community we were in last was occupied for 6 months by the Russian army,
Six
and so
months.
you're talking about rapes, you're talking about torture, you're talking about murder, you're talking about mass graves. These kids have seen it all, they've lived through it. And so to me, anything we can do to go out there and help, you know, um, that's what we're doing. And so we're starting with these journals. We're working with a university in Zhytomyr, in which is west of Kiev, and working on the app to develop the app, and it'll have an AI feature where there's instant access to be able to discuss what you're going through and all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a roundabout deal. The Ukrainian college students, they run everything there, and they amaze me. Like I can't comprehend what all they've done with this organization. It's crazy how fast we've gotten to where we are. The contacts we've made, the people that we're working with, is kind of mind-boggling. But so that's kind of a quick overview. Maybe not as quick as you wanted, but a little
Oh,
overview of what we're doing there.
oh,
And
nah,
and I and I
nah.
can answer any questions about Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much misinformation. I'm gonna stop saying it. There's so many lies out there
Yeah.
about Ukraine, and it's kind of hard for me to watch every day.
Mm-hmm.
But I can answer any kind of questions that you may have. I'll be
Oh,
gl- I'll be I'll be
oh,
glad to.
It's just funny that you mentioned like brevity, just because like I'm like go search the catalog of answers. If there's one thing I am, it's long-winded. Goodness. Um, so I mean that's totally fine. Like these are the sorts of Christian experiences I feel like that should be lifted up within the church more than they are. Actually serving the least of these, actually kind of putting, you know, uh, country distinctions, holding them lesser than the true things of the faith, the cross, our shared humanity. I just love how you said that earlier about you being attacked because you're there, but them being attacked because they exist, and how it almost sounds like it was that realization of dehumanizing oppression that kind of locked you into go mode on this. And I just point that out just because it's baked into the spiritual DNA of real Christians, of real Christianity, whatever your whatever your skin color, whatever your background, if you really came to Christ, you hate dehumanization. You hate seeing others dehumanized because the essence of Christianity, you might say, is the Messiah showing us in him a new way to be human, a better eternal way to be human, and us just kind of, you know, learning day by day how to flesh that out until he comes back and takes his stand upon the earth. So I mean that's beautiful stuff. And it's
And I
tough.
and I and I and I'll say this: the we were there in this certain community on the 10th of February, and just 3 days ago, that school where we met those kids got bombed.
Mm,
Um, you know, so they're all okay. You know, they weren't meeting at the school anymore. They were doing everything online,
mm-hmm,
and they were actually able to gather with us in this really cool underground classroom that some organization created, that they could still get together as, as friends and see a tutor and all of that kind of stuff. So that's where we actually met. But the school that it's at actually got pretty destroyed. So, I'm proud of our team because they're living in the face of all of this. I mean,
mm-hmm.
they see it daily. They hear the explosions overhead. They see the damage. They have loved ones at the front line. They've lost people that they care about, and yet, they created this journal. I mean, it started from nothing. They wrote it. They created it, and so there's this real desire to serve people,
Mm-hmm.
and to serve their country. And, it's just a beautiful thing. I literally would give up everything for them. I would,
Hey,
yeah.
knowing you, I wouldn't expect anything else, to be perfectly honest. It can be tough on this side of everything. Hearing everything just on the news, and you know, I mean, obviously everyone knows about kind of sort of what's going on in Ukraine, but not being boots on the ground and not having someone that you can kind of ask firsthand that's kind of seen some stuff. It can be difficult to sort through the lies and the misinformation. So, just off the top of your head, what would be kind of some of the, top two or three biggest, lies that you've seen, and what would you say the truth behind those things is?
Well, it's weird because, like, the picture is bleak there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, it is, especially when you go to the east. And here's the thing to realize: is like every city in Ukraine, like major city, gets hit. Even if it's in the west. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like, people have died all across the country. Lviv is about as far west as you can go, and people have been killed there with missiles and rockets and drones and stuff like that. So, it affects even physically the whole country, but the trauma of the whole country, is strong. The amazing thing is their determination.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned I was just in Kharkiv, which is 19 miles from the Russian border. And it's a city. It's the second largest city in Ukraine, and it gets hit all the time. I mean, if you were walking with me down the street, it's rare to pass a building that doesn't have some damage,
Oh
you
wow.
know. And then some of the buildings are completely gone. But I mean, even buildings that are still standing and they're using them and everything, there's boarded up windows where things have been blown out and stuff like that. The most amazing thing is the spirit of the people that live there. And I went to a mall one night while I was there, and it's a completely modern mall. I mean, as nice as anything you would see here, and you couldn't get a seat at the food court because there
Mm,
were so many people there.
yeah.
all the stores were packed. There was a karaoke contest going on the main floor that you could hear through the whole mall. Teenagers are everywhere with their friends, um, and I left the city that time thinking to myself, there's no way in the world that Putin will ever defeat this country. It's impossible. I mean, like you you're literally at a city that should be completely folded and everybody gone, and I'm at a mall where I can't find a place to sit in the food court,
Yeah.
Um, and so they're singing Nirvana on karaoke Nirvana downstairs. I mean, I'm like, this is just crazy. And um, so things are very, very hard there. Um, People have lost everything, but there's still this determination. You still go to beautiful, beautiful cities. Like I could take you places, and you're just like, I'm not in a war zone. There's no way I'm in a war zone. And then all of a sudden, there's an air raid alert.
Hmm.
And you're reminded, oh, I'm in a war zone. Or that night you may hear explosions all around you. You know, um, so there's this content, and like Karen, my wife, she even told me recently, it's time for you to start posting pictures of the bad stuff because like I always try to show the beauty of Ukraine. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? But we've reached a point now. This ties in with everything else. The evangelical church in America,
Hmm.
and largely who they've decided to follow, has has begun telling the lies about Ukraine.
Mm.
You know, um, Zelensky's a dictator. No,
Hmm.
Zelensky's not a dictator. Zelensky was elected with 73% of the vote. You
Mm.
know, he's a dictator. He won't let them have elections. No, the Constitution says because they're under martial law, they cannot have elections. Imagine trying to have elections while all your soldiers on the front line fighting. What are you going to take voting booths out there while they're fighting? Are you going? You've got 5 million. Actually, probably more than that. Yeah, more than 5 million. Ukrainians around the world as refugees. You're going to get out to all of them and try to get, you know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
it makes no sense. And their constitution itself says you can't have elections under martial law. And the only way martial law can be lifted is if the Congress, the Parliament, come together and lift it. And so, there's all these things. They say Russia, only invaded because Ukraine wanted to join NATO, and they can't have NATO on their doorstep. Well, Finland did join NATO in 23. Finland has a huge border with Russia. You know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
there's all these things that keep being talked about, and I get so frustrated because I'm like, just look for truth. But the sad thing is, you hear that term post truth. You know,
Hmm.
I think we're there. I mean,
Yeah.
like when you can't agree on what the truth is. I mean, there can only be one truth about everything,
Right.
you know? But when everybody has their own truth about any given situation, it's a crazy place to be, you
I mean,
know?
it breaks communication down. It makes it very difficult to be together to even function in reality when you can't even agree on some of the just basic aspects of what reality is. And
Right.
I know that was, at least for me, that was a big motivating factor in starting the Foreign Saints, just as a podcast, and just kind of just foundationally getting back to what does the Bible say, such that, like, my big motto for the show, and I find a way to put the reverb sound effect in there every time, so indulge me, is all you got to do is read. That's all you really got to do, because everything else builds off that. You know what I mean? You don't have to make stuff up. You don't have to assume what the
Yep.
Bible teaches. You just have to, no, just take what the Bible says and wrestle with that. And if it's
Yep.
extreme, then maybe you're too cold. And
Hmm.
maybe that's the thing that needs to be, maybe that's the thing that needs to be addressed. Don't turn the volume down on the Bible. Turn the volume up on your living to come into
Yes.
lockstep with Jesus and actually love your neighbor as yourself, and love God with everything you got. Um,
Right.
and we dropped the ball on that in a lot of ways. I would say, when we traded out truth for political points, and in so
Mhm.
doing, we ended up blinding ourselves to so many opportunities for the kingdom
Yes.
on this earth in this age. And it sounds like what I'm getting from this. I'm not trying to like take what you say and like twist it for my own
Yeah.
agenda,
Yeah.
but it sounds like what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of kingdom opportunities as well in this conflict that are being missed,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
various post-truth reasons. um
Right.
Depends on what
And let,
sect you
let me
talk to, but
and let me add one other thing that I think is big because I hear it all the time. You hear people talk about it's unrealistic for Ukraine to think that they shouldn't have to give up part of their territory to
mhm,
to Russia. That's like one of the common things you hear. On a lot of different levels, that's bad. It's bad that you would say it's okay for the neighboring country to invade a sovereign country and take part of their territory. Like that's going to have major consequences around the world. You know what I'm saying?
mhm.
So if you say all of a sudden it's okay for them to do that, then that's extremely bad. But then when you go, Ukraine should agree to give up part of their territory to end this war. What I just told you about occupied territories, the
Mhm.
rapes, the murders, the torture. So when people hear that, they think Ukraine needs to give up their land. When Ukrainians hear it, they hear, no, there are Ukrainians in those occupied territories that are being raped, they're being murdered, they're being tortured every single day. So it's a completely different way of looking at it. It's not just land. There are Ukrainian people there that are suffering through the occupation.
Yeah, there's a
And
human
so
element that's going to be
yes, there's a
lost, and
human element that like, okay, so Ukraine's supposed to just be like, okay, we're not gonna worry about those citizens anymore. You know, um, when they as they deoccupy these areas,
mhm,
they hear the stories because the people tell them this is what was happening. They can take them to underground chambers where they were kept for months at a time. You know, and you see mass graves and all these things. So when you realize that stuff is still going on
mhm.
in those territories, it's hard to just look at it as, yeah, they need to give up part of their territories to end the war.
Well, I mean,
It's
also
it's a
just
lot it's a
from
lot
what
deeper than that.
from what you're saying, it's that like it might end the war in the sense of open conflict, but it's not going to end conflict. It's not going to
No.
end. It's not going to end suffering. It's not going to end dehumanization. It's just going to move dehumanization into another stage where
Yes.
it's almost accepted now.
Yeah.
You know, like it's okay now because we seeded this.
Yeah.
So now we can't. You lose the ability to be able to say much to it authoritatively.
Yeah.
You know,
And in the infamous Oval Office meeting, what, 2 weeks ago, or however long ago it
yes.
was, Zelensky was simply saying, you know, he was saying that we have a track record of what Putin does when there's a ceasefire.
Hmm.
You know, he makes all these agreements, but then continues with the war. And
Right.
so that's why it was like, we need a ceasefire, but we need security guarantees with that ceasefire, because without that,
Right.
we have nothing. And so, a lot of times this goes back to, okay, like what I told the Ukrainians when we started our organization. I'm not going to be the American that tells you what you need.
Hmm.
You live there. It's your country. It's your generation. You tell me what you need. And I think it's kind of a flaw of us as Americans sometimes. We tell people what they need, you
Yeah.
know? And really we need to just shut our mouths and listen.
Yeah. Like that's kind of the thing, is like we've got a lot of material wealth that we can leverage to the flourishing of humanity in America in a lot of ways. And, everyone's perspective can be important, but it's when people start to get into this realm of like, because I have the material aid, that means that my philosophical musings are just as valid. I mean, in all honesty, are more valid than yours, because you're the one in a tough spot and I'm not. So, you gotta listen to me. Which I'm like, the only time that's ever really true is if it's your kid and you're the parent. Like outside of that,
Yeah,
like outside of that, you might be getting a little bit above your station there.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, no, that's very, I think, an edifying point to make. um and then as we kind of move into, I guess you might say, this last section here, this last topic, it's kind of a double-headed topic. End up combining all these things kind of into one, is Christian nationalism. I hate it, you hate it. I'm not sure which one of us actually hates it more, if we were to have that conversation. But what are some of the parallels, I guess you might say, like in a Christian nationalism that you've seen uh, in a Ukraine and in an America, that are kind of similar, and then kind of contrast that with what you've seen churches that you would consider to be healthy that are doing as well in the midst of all this.
yeah. So in Ukraine, the Orthodox Church is the main church. You also have a good many Catholic churches. You also have Baptist churches. You have Assemblies of God. You have all the different bodies of believers we have here. But the main churches, like I said, are Orthodox, and you have these two different groups of Orthodox churches. You have the Moscow Patriarchate, and then you have the Kiev Patriarchate. So you have a Russian version of the Orthodox Church, and you have
Mm-hmm.
a Ukrainian version of the Orthodox Church, and they've pretty much coexisted, through the years. I mean, there's differences and stuff like that, but they've pretty much coexisted. During this conflict, the the Moscow Patriarchate has been it's been used by the Kremlin
Mm-hmm.
many times through the years, but in this conflict, um, even more so. For instance, um, Russian soldiers have literally been told by the top uh, leader of the Moscow Church that basically they receive a ticket to heaven for fighting for Moscow.
Wow.
Um, you have you have Ukrainians that go to a Moscow church in Ukraine that are being told lies about why Russia invaded Ukraine.
Mm.
So, like the lies that we hear here, you have Ukrainians hearing those same lies from their church leaders.
Oh wow.
And so I mean, yeah, it's caused like tremendous conflict. So much so that in certain areas, those churches have been shut down because they were doing so much damage to the Ukrainian cause. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? That
Yeah.
they had to be like, no, you can't keep doing this. And so it came like what we do see here, and I'll hit on a lot of that later, but in a minute. But where it was hijacked for a political purpose, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and so that's been a huge part of the conflict, to be able to see, what's going on there. And you have families that are completely divided,
Mm.
because I know a family, for instance, where the the son is fighting on the front lines, for Ukraine, and the parents are up in the air over whether Ukraine is justified completely in what they're doing.
Yeah.
because they're part of the Moscow church and they're being told something different.
Right.
So
Right.
imagine the tension in that family, you know? So it's that extreme, as far as the church is there. It's also beautiful, like I said, getting there as early as I did, being there in May of 2022, and you would go to churches and internally displaced people are sleeping in the church.
Mm.
You know, every meal of the day is being fed by church members. And it's one of those things where I couldn't help but think about our own country and think, okay, what would this look like if it was happening here? Would the church be responding in the same way? But I got to see the church, responding in a beautiful way there, and serving and loving and meeting the needs of these people that had lost everything. So you get to see the good side and you get to see the bad side. You get to see how it can all be co-opted,
Mm-hmm.
by for political reasons,
Right.
that have incredibly negative impact on Ukraine itself. So um, yeah. So then when you talk about Christian nationalism here, you know, um, I'm old enough that I've been able to see the whole development of this.
Mm.
You know, um, you didn't know where it was going early on. You know, um, and I mean, in full disclosure, I told you I grew up Southern Baptist. I was a Republican my whole life. I'm an independent now, but I was a Republican my whole life. Um, you know, I saw I saw the shift go from Jimmy Carter
Mm-hmm.
being, literally a Southern Baptist Sunday school teacher, you know, to all of a sudden, the Christian right movement, Jerry Falwell, all of these people part of this whole movement, and latching on to a cause like abortion,
Mm-hmm.
and everything comes down to we got to vote based on this one issue, to the point to where and then you also had people like James Dobson and people like that teaching humanism, is this thing that's coming on. We gotta stand up for absolute truth, believe
Mm-hmm.
it or not. um without absolute truth we have nothing.
Mm.
And to see, like I said, and at that time I'm a young teenager hearing all this stuff and I'm watching it develop.
Yeah.
And and then to in 2015 seeing these same people that I had grown up learning all this stuff from, for all of a sudden truth doesn't matter anymore. you know
Mm.
you can have alternative facts. You hear all of these things coming about, and it doesn't matter that this person lies 10 million times a day. Now here I am, exaggerating too, but you
Yep.
know what I'm saying. Like I'm watching the same people, and I remember being able to talk to people and go, I remember you back in the early 80s. Your big fear was humanism, and you know you have to have absolute truth, and now you're embracing lies. Like I don't how did we make this leap? you know
Man.
um I remember being 15 years old and I was at a Ronald Reagan rally,
Mm-hmm.
you know uh across from South Park in Charlotte.
Yeah.
I mean, I was literally at a Reagan rally as he was running for his second term. Can you imagine? This is what I was thinking this last time around. Can I imagine, let's say I fell and hit my head leaving that rally as a 15-year-old, and then I woke up at Madison Square Garden to the crazy rally that was going on there. Here in this last election cycle, right before the vote.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way you would be able to convince me that. Now I don't believe it's the same party. I believe the Republican Party doesn't exist anymore. But
Mm.
you would not be able to tell me that I'm a part of this same movement. There's no way. So that's part of my problem is is that I'm old enough and I've paid attention enough
Mm-hmm.
that I've seen how this thing has developed. And in 2008, I looked at the two candidates, John McCain, Barack Obama, Republican my whole life. I read The Audacity of Hope, and I'm like, I kind of like what this guy has to say. You know, I do.
Yeah.
And I voted for him. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this Republican, lifelong Republican. I'm like, I like what he has to say more than I like what McCain has to say. I'm voting for this guy. My this this whole Christian nationalism nonsense. My 8-year-old son at the time was told by one of his closest family members, an adult that I cherish, look up to, and everything, that I was not a Christian. My 8-year-old kid was told that I'm not a Christian because I voted for Barack Obama. Now, that's kind of when I realized how messed up everything was, like at the extreme level.
Yeah.
And I decided then I'll never vote again. I didn't vote in 2012. I'm like, screw it, man. Like, I'm not gonna be a part of any of this nonsense anymore. This is stupid. You know. Um, I did feel a responsibility once Trump came on the scene that I needed to. In my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna have grandkids one day,
Mm-hmm.
and they're gonna study this time in history, and they're gonna go, Pawpaw, where were you in all of this? I want to be able to say this is what I did. You know what I'm saying? So I felt a responsibility at that point to vote again, but it's crazy where things have gone, man. It's crazy where the church is. At this point in my life, like the hardest people for me to even reach out to about helping with what we're doing in Ukraine are American evangelicals that I've known my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
because now they've been told that all of these lies about this country. Now they've been told, like, literally, you can go back and look at America's view of Zelensky and how it went down rapidly when Donald Trump called him a dictator. Like, and so, like, all of these people that I've been close to my whole life that know me, you
Mm-hmm.
would not believe the direct messages I get
Oh,
from
I
those
mean,
people.
I probably would.
Yeah, you
I've
would. Yeah, you would.
I've lost my I've had my conservative, my Democrat, and my black card given
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
You get it all. You
revoked.
can get it all yanked from you just like
So
that.
like
Yeah,
I've had it given and taken away, given and taken away
yeah. Oh
so
yeah,
many times.
yeah. We
That
want to claim you. Now we don't want to claim you. We want to.
right,
Yeah,
right,
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I
um,
mean, so it's
yeah,
like, it's so there are some similarities of how the church has been hijacked by politicians, and I think part of it honestly just goes back to what you said earlier. Just read. And I'll say even go beyond read and think.
yes,
And I think for so long the and I'll put a lot of this blame on pastors. A lot of times pastors are so freaking insecure that they can't handle somebody asking them a question or questioning something that they taught. You're
yes,
supposed to just believe it because your pastor said it. And if you live in that environment, it's easy in other environments to be hijacked
mm-hmm,
and to be, caught up in something that you should be able to think through and read and go, this is completely, contradicts Jesus's teachings, you know.
yeah.
So I mean, I try to be patient. I try to be sympathetic. I'm not too good at it.
Hey man, like we all, we've all got our
I've
days,
got my own problems, man. I know
I
I do.
mean, like I said, it's kind of my lane for a minute. I feel like God's got me in a weird place ministry wise. It's like I've got a transgender buddy of mine, really good friend, really good friend. He's probably going to listen to an episode like this. And like we have a lot of really good conversation off air about just so many things. Um, and he's said to me like, "Man, like, are you sure you're a conservative?" And I'm like, I never claimed to be that. What I said was I'm a Christian. That's what I said,
Yeah.
And then I've got, people on the, conservative side that sometimes hear me and they're like, "Are you sure you're not a liberal?" And I'm like, I didn't say that either. I said I'm a Christian. That's what I am.
Right.
And I got a verse or two for this. Let me see if I'm actually in the right spot. Um, John's a good one too. Um, when Pilate is talking to Jesus, are you the king of the Jews? Because Pilate is focused on politics. He's like, what are the political ramifications for this Jesus guy being in my neck of the woods? And Jesus just calls him out. Are you saying this on your own accord, or did others say it to you about me? Are you just parroting political points about me?
Yep.
And Jesus just has to correct him. He's like, dude, my kingdom's not of this world. If it were, my servants would have been fighting, but it's not, so they don't.
Yep.
But Pilate, by the time he gets to verse 38, he's in that post-truth mode. What even is truth?
Hmm.
You know, Jesus saying, I had a purpose. I was born for a purpose, and I had a purpose to come into the world to bear witness to the truth. And everyone who listens to me is of the truth. And Pilate is so twisted up in politics, he doesn't even know what truth is anymore. And then you've got in Mark 8:15, Jesus again warning his disciples, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And we've talked about this on the show before, so people that listen, you already know what I'm about to say, but the leaven of the Pharisees, religious hypocrisy, and then you've got the leaven of Herod, which is political hypocrisy. And in this conversation, I hear, everything of what you said with those churches and whatnot, kind of giving what almost sounds like wartime indulgences, like,
Hmm.
fight for the
That's
right
exactly right.
side, you get into heaven, and just allowing themselves to be co-opted without resistance by their respective beastly nation. And I'm like, yeah, you guys are infected with the leaven of Herod, bro. Political hypocrisy that's, causing you to sell out on what the gospel is, which is horrendous because you both exist in a time, in a place, for such a time and place as to, I would argue, to lift up the name of Jesus in the middle of such a dark time to a people that is resilient but needs Jesus in the midst of all this, as well, just like all the rest of us that are breathing right now.
Yeah.
Um, and so, as we I gotta have you back on. I gotta have you
All
back
right.
on for the day.
I'll
Um,
be glad to.
if it wasn't for the fact that my PC got fried, we would be here for like another hour if you had it. But I gotta
We'll
get
do it, man.
the
We can.
PC fixed. But what would you say? Just what would you kind of wrap this all up into one ball? Christians listening, what does Dump Harper want them to take away from everything that he's talked about today?
that that Jesus has to be the center of everything. I mean, it has to be about Jesus. It has to be about Jesus's teachings. Like I said, you can read the other verses, the other books of the Bible. Like, yeah, Paul is great. I mean, the Old Testament. There's so many things we can learn. But if it's called Christianity, then obviously it's supposed to be about Christ. If we're called Christians, then we're supposed to be about Christ. So, you know, here again, 20 years ago, I spent a year where, in my own personal time, the only Bible I read was the Gospels. I just kept reading through the Gospels over and over and over. And it changed my life in a way that I could never go back to what I was before that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I'm, obviously willing to share my struggles. I share my struggles with my faith. I share about my doubts. You know, what I'm dealing with right now. I don't mind saying all of that. Um, Everything has to go back to the teachings of Christ. If Jesus is God on earth, then then why would it not be that every word and every action and everything he does is the most important thing for us to look at? The most important way for us to live out. He says, "Follow me." Like, it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
This is who I am. I'm here representing my father and to do my father's work. These are his teachings through me. Live like me, obey my teachings, follow me. And so I think we've taken things and I'm not saying it's easy to follow Jesus, that's not my point. But we've made things so much more difficult in trying to, it has to be my version of Christianity. It has to be my denomination. It has to be, you know, listen to what we teach, not so, no, let's listen to what Jesus teaches. And let's stop the nonsense where you go, well, what Jesus really meant here. No, just believe that you're there in that crowd, or you're one of those disciples, or you're someone that needs healing. You're there and you've never heard any of it before. And as you read it, pretend like it's your very first time ever hearing these words and see what you take away from it.
See, so that, standing ovation of an answer, bro. Like, it's gotta be about him. It's gotta be about him. So I love it. That's what I've been doing on my podcast as well. If that moves you, I would definitely encourage that you check out maybe my verse by verse walk through Matthew, maybe help you get going. Not talking to you. I mean, you can listen to it, don't.
Hey, I can
That
listen to it,
one's
man.
that one's for the audience. You know what I mean? Like you want to hear about this Jesus cat that's got Dump so up in arms about it, man. Go read the Gospels. So yeah, Dump, appreciate you for having you on, man. It's a blessing to me. It's a blessing to those that will listen. Hopefully a lot. I hope it's a blessing also to some of your crew over in Ukraine if they get a chance to listen. Just that there's still some people abroad willing to hold a standard for Jesus and let truth reign, and to the best of our ability. But yeah, I'll definitely find some excuse to get you back on to talk again. That was
Let's do it.
Yeah, that was awesome, man. That was awesome. Just some announcements for the people. If you want to get in touch with me, maybe you got some questions or you want to have some time up here on the stage to talk about anything Christianity or Christianity adjacent, hit me up at the Foreign Saints the Foreign Saints podcast at gmail.com, all lowercase. I'll put it on the screen for you in post, the Foreign Saints podcast at gmail.com. And go check out some of the other content on the channel. And Dump, I don't know if your organization takes donations or if your website has a link for that sort of thing.
Yes, it does.
Good. So if you like what you're hearing from him, if you want to be a part of what God's doing through there, check out Vidic, check out his organization, find that donation page, and bless him, man. You heard the band, we got wolves on both sides of the national lines, bro. We gotta fund the real ones. We gotta fund the real ones out here, man. So Dump, appreciate it. And
thanks, Corey. Anytime.
Yeah, man. Until next time, I'm Saint K. This has been the Foreign Saints podcast. Go in peace.